On today's episode of the Human Atavist podcast, I have a special guest to help me talk about the history of nutrition. Hello everyone and welcome to the Human Atavist podcast. My name is Sven Kron, and here we're going to explore and follow the examples set down by our ancestors so we can truly achieve the happiness, health, and vitality that we all deserve. I hope you enjoy our journey as we discover what it means to be humans, human atavist, rewild your health, change your life. I want to remind everyone to join our movement by heading to humanatavist.com/podcast. That's human, ATAVI.st/podcast, and sign up for a copy of my latest ebook, Activate Your Nutrition. You'll also get a ton of free content to help you along your path. Today's guest avidly researches all aspects of natural health and self-improvement, including traditional and wild nutrition, natural movement, indigenous methods of parenting, spirituality, and psychology. I would very warmly like to welcome my wife and partner, Briar. Briar, how about we just jump right in, all right? So why is processed food bad for you?
Well, essentially it doesn't contain all of the nutrients that our bodies have come to expect from, 200,000 years of human evolution. So for example, flour, the white flour that most people eat is stripped of the bran and the germ from the whole grain. And the bran and the germ are what contains a lot of the nutrients as far as, B vitamins and all the, fats and protein and things like that. So when you strip it away, sometimes synthetic versions of the vitamins are added back in, but it's not all of the vitamins. And
so why, I still don't understand why they don't, or why they add the synthetic vitamins back in. If you look on milk that is fortified with DHA, it says on the back that it has fish oil added to it. Like why do they try to refortify it if what they took away was where the nutrients were? Why don't they just leave all that stuff back on?
It's essentially to increase shelf life. So, again, with the flour example, if you leave in the oils or the bran and the germ with the oil and then grind it up into flour, it goes bad very quickly. It'll go rancid.
I see. And, I guess, does drying, like when it actually dries the flour so that it can be put in a bag on the shelf, are they trying to take out the fat from it or something? Or what are they doing with that?
Well, it's not specifically to take out the fat. Again, it's just to increase the shelf life.
Okay, so what else is bad about processed foods?
Well, as far as modern diets in general, there's a big lack of variety. Americans really eat just a handful of foods. It's, mainly corn and wheat and soy, basically, and then a handful of vegetables and things like that. I think that the modern American eats on average 30 varieties of plant or species of plant a year, whereas, our hunter-gatherer ancestors in traditional societies would eat about 100.
Did you know that the only leafy green that Americans buy is iceberg lettuce? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another processed thing because it's bred so much that basically all the nutrients have been taken out of it because people don't like the bitter taste of greens. And so they've bred iceberg lettuce to take out that bitter flavor, which is where a lot of the nutrients and the medicinal qualities of greens are.
Yeah, all in the bitter type flavors. So the more bitter flavor something has, the more medicinal it is, I guess, right?
Yeah, to an extent. Of course, bitter is also a predictor of, toxicity, but it's kind of a spectrum.
You think you could be able to tell the difference between a taste of a medicinal bitter and a toxic bitter? You think it's a slightly different bitter taste?
Well, there's not really a line. They're not exactly separate because small amounts of, toxins can be medicinal. And so there's, I don't think you'd be able to eat something to the extent that it would be toxic to you unless you just really force yourself. But
So if you could eat 10 pounds of dandelion or something, would it be toxic for you at that level?
Yes. But nobody's going to eat that. You'd probably start vomiting before you got to that point to where it'd be toxic to you. So.
Yeah, that would be pretty intense.
Yeah.
Or what about something like the pokeweed or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
If you just like eat a handful of pokeweed berries.
Well, I tried one pokeweed berry once, and I had to spit it out. It was intense. So I can't imagine eating even a handful of them. I don't think anybody could do that.
Well, what about, something I never thought about till just now is in the movie Brave, when the mom gathers those
Nightshade berries.
Nightshade berries, and then she just like eats them like they're
Yeah.
decadent or something. Like
that wouldn't happen. In real life, that would not happen.
Yeah, I didn't think about that till just now, but it seems pretty silly actually.
Yeah, I don't think the person who wrote that in had experience with wild foods like that.
Yeah, clearly, and then they pick Nightshade just like it's a generic.
Yeah, and Nightshade, kind of like any quote-unquote toxic plant, it can be medicinal if you use it correctly and in very small amounts.
So are you saying potatoes are medicinal?
Well, potatoes, again, have been, they've had those qualities bred out of them, but
Yeah.
breeding changes food a lot.
Well, so really, like, why all of this stuff causes cancer? Because it'll lower your immune system, or it
completely messes up your whole body chemistry, really.
I assume immune system because your immune system really comes from your gut, and if you eat bad food and you don't have what your gut flora need to survive, then you're going to be deficient in stuff to assimilate the minerals and vitamins that you need. So.
Yeah, definitely. And you can, develop leaky gut, and yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that. And of course, it also goes to antibiotic use and things like that. But
well, the cancer cells themselves, like, they spawn in us all the time, right? There's always some kind of cancer cell, but our body flushes it out.
Right.
And it's normal.
But our body depends on the correct nutrients and, other broader things as well to...
Is it a function of our immune system that flushes that stuff out, or... I don't really know. I've never looked into that myself.
I'm sure it's a lot of things working together, but the immune system would definitely be a component of it. Yeah. And also your liver function to process out toxins. Cancer has a lot to do with toxins as well as just plain food. Toxins from food, but also environmental toxins as far as all the, chemicals that we use in our homes, even to build our homes, all the, self-care products we use.
Yeah.
All of the air and water pollutants.
And so if your liver isn't getting the nutrients it needs, it's not going to be able to perform the right processes.
Right. It'll be overwhelmed, essentially.
And so even if you detox, all this stuff will still get through just because it doesn't have the stuff it needs to do its own job. Yeah.
And then it might be reabsorbed by the gut if the gut isn't functioning properly. And yeah, it's all tied together.
And so when the toxins get stored in fat, it's your body trying to coat it in like mucus or something, and then it buffers it into fat so that it doesn't harm you. So like if something gets in, like you've got leaky gut, it gets into your bloodstream, and then it gets stored somewhere. Why does it get put into a cell and stuck somewhere? Like, why do you have more fat if you're more toxic,
Yeah, essentially it's a protection mechanism to just kind of store it away somewhere instead of it, like you said, going through the bloodstream, where it can get into all your other tissues and organs and really compromise the function of those.
So in your system of digestion, like, why doesn't it just keep it in the intestinal tract? Why does it try to dump it out? Wouldn't you eliminate any kind of toxin if it stayed in your digestive system?
Well, no, it could be reabsorbed.
Because I guess that's the function of the large intestines, right?
Small intestines, yeah.
The small intestines? I
Yeah.
thought the large intestines would absorb everything.
No, your small intestines absorbs the nutrients. Large intestines is, mainly the water and everything.
Oh, it only does water.
And the fiber, yeah. The fiber feeds your bacteria
Is it
in
most
your
of the bacteria
large colon.
in Isn't most of the bacteria in your large intestines? Like, isn't
Um,
that why your appendix is attached
yeah,
to your large intestine?
I think most of it. Yeah.
Do you want to mention that the appendix is not a vestigial organ?
Right. Yeah, I don't know if there are any purely vestigial organs necessarily. It's kind of our, arrogance of Western society to think that we know everything about the body. When they first were discovering vitamins, they thought that's all there was to food. And so they thought that, they could produce these synthetic vitamins in a laboratory and just feed people those and you'd be completely healthy, have everything your body needs. But obviously they didn't know all of the vitamins even, and we still don't. They didn't know about minerals. They didn't know about antioxidants.
How it's absorbed in complexes, so you can't absorb, D without K or something
right.
like that.
And, if you take a vitamin A supplement without vitamin D, then they can be toxic, especially if it's synthetic vitamin A. But
yeah.
And that's where all the warnings, of vitamin A come from. Like, conventional medicine warns women not to eat liver because it has too much vitamin A.
Interesting.
Whereas the studies that show vitamin A toxicity is used with synthetic vitamin A that's not balanced by vitamin D.
So your appendix, it actually repopulates your intestines if something happens. Like, what if you were to take antibiotics? Would it affect your appendix? I don't really know that or not.
I'm not entirely sure, actually.
Because I know that when you get sick or like you have diarrhea or something like that, it pulls out a lot of the flora living in your gut, and then the appendix is supposed to repopulate it.
Right.
Well, I'd also seen that the bacteria in your appendix is determined, of course, by your mother, but if you have like a C-section, you don't have as diverse, as an adult, you don't have as diverse flora in your appendix.
Yeah, that's true of your gut in general.
Well, don't you think you would accumulate over time the different flora and stick it in your appendix? I don't know how all that works. I guess it would just spread, but wouldn't it still be diverse? I'm surprised that if you aren't populating it, constantly, I guess I'm just surprised that people don't have many forms of stuff to fill their gut flora, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's kind of an ecology in there, so
And
and there's so many factors that, in the modern world that really damage and destroy your gut flora. And so if that happens, especially if you take antibiotics or something, that kind of gives way for kind of more aggressive species to just take over, like yeasts and certain types of bacteria.
So taking different kinds of antibiotics, like if you were to take a broad spectrum versus just a singular antibiotic, what kind of different effects would that have? If you just got rid of one strain, it wouldn't be quite so bad.
Yeah, probably not. Of course, depending what it is, I'm sure, but
You don't think it would cause imbalances or something?
well, it probably would because there'd be a chain reaction going on, but yeah, I think the broad spectrum antibiotics would probably be a little more harmful because it kills off so many species, and so that leaves just a few to take over.
Does it also kill out yeast and stuff? Like if you had candida and you took antibiotics, would it kill all the...
I don't think so.
You think it only
Not
does...
positive on that, but I don't think so because I know that yeast, candida is, a very common overgrowth that happens after antibiotic use.
That's because it's fed by sugar too, and if people are
Right.
eating lots of carbs and processed foods, they're going to be getting a lot more...
Yeah, you don't have to
sugar.
take antibiotics to have this condition of the overgrowth of yeast.
It's a condition.
Well, yeah.
It's a spectrum.
And with that in particular, it can also spread to your other organs. I'm not sure
So you
the
can
mechanism
get,
of that.
candida
But
of the brain.
yeah, pretty much.
And that would cause what, Alzheimer's or something?
Yeah, I don't know.
Leaky
It's
brain.
possible.
Isn't there a leaky brain?
Well, yeah, the gut and the brain are pretty much connected.
The
So
vagus nerve and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
but isn't there actually a condition that they call the leaky brain where
I'm not sure. I don't think I've heard of that.
it blurs the folds in your brain or something? And I know that's really what happens with Alzheimer's. It starts to get kind of mushy and holy and stuff.
Yeah.
Like mad cow. Someone told me the other day that mad cow disease was a disease that was contagious that spreads between cows. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of debate on mad cow disease. I know that Sally Fallon, author of Nourishing Traditions, has said that mad cow disease is actually probably from all the, neurotoxic pesticides from the feed that they're, given.
Really? Mm-hmm. I thought it was from cannibalizing.
That's the conventional viewpoint, but I've kind of learned to question the conventional viewpoint.
I thought that also in Papua New Guinea, where the natives, it's customary to cannibalize people. At least at small extents, they have a human version of mad cow disease.
Well, it's possible. I don't know. I haven't looked too much into that, so.
I was trying to think of what it was called. The
mad person disease.
No, the mad cow disease. It was something weird, something.
Oh, like
spongiform. Yeah,
spongiform.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Something with sponge.
Yeah.
Encephalitis or something.
Yeah. I guess it makes sense because it turns your brain into a sponge.
Yeah.
SpongeBob, right? It's just a little square holy thing.
Well, hopefully your brain isn't square, but
I suppose you'd have more problems. So with someone like Einstein, they say that his brain was
15% wider than average.
Yeah, it was wider. So then his the reasoning section of his brain, the part that he used to do math and science and stuff like that, it was bigger. And you think that was just a straight up deformity that caused that? I
have no idea. I don't think everybody's brain is exactly alike, obviously. So I don't know if that was actually the reason for his intelligence or not. I mean, I'm sure if we looked at, my brain versus your brain, there'd be certain areas that were bigger in mine versus yours. And
probably not. Yeah. Anyway, so what is a traditional diet? I assume that traditional diets, of course, they're much better than the standard American diet, which causes all of these diseases, causes all of this problem. Mm-hmm. But the traditional diet, what is that? What is the definition? Why is it good?
Well, it's essentially what we've, evolved with, the past, again, 200,000 years. Both hunter-gatherers and
2 million years.
Well, yes. I meant 200,000 years as our current species.
I suppose. That's when Homo emerged.
It's when Homo sapiens emerged.
Really?
Yeah,
so
200,000 years. Homo
emerged 2 million years ago.
I think it's 3 million years ago, wasn't it?
I thought it was
3.5.
I thought it was 200,000 and then 2 million.
I think it's longer than that.
Interesting. So then Australopithecus was before that. Anyway, traditional diets, what is an example then, or why is it so much better?
Well, again, it's what we've evolved with, and so this is what our body expects. It's providing your body with all of the nutrients that you need to function optimally.
So is it a coincidence that traditional diets are good for us? No, it is not. It is cause and effect.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that really makes sense,
We've co-evolved with the species that we eat.
It doesn't make sense that a South Beach diet would be the optimal diet for us to eat because we didn't evolve for 2 million years in South Beach, Florida or whatever. So that, yeah.
And another factor to look at when you look at diets is ultimately the real test of whether a diet is good for you or not is whether it can produce healthy, robust children who then go on to produce further healthy, robust children.
What's the definition of healthy, though? Would vegan be healthy?
No.
Why is that?
Well, vegan diets can be good for a temporary cleansing or something like that.
So you think that maybe it was part of at least some of the human diets at some point? Like
Definitely, whether on purpose or not. I think hunter-gatherers, there would be times of shortage, and so they would kind of fast, especially in late winter, early spring, when there wasn't as much, food available. And so they wouldn't eat as much, they wouldn't be eating as richly. And then with, civilization, if you look back in things like the Bible, there are, and other religions as well, there are periods of fasting where they abstain from meat and things like that. So yeah, it's part of the human experience.
When Jesus spent 40 days in the desert, he did not fast because he was eating, honey and crickets or something like that?
Yeah, probably locusts and honey like John the Baptist.
Hey.
Essenes.
Didn't the Essenes all fast? Wasn't that part of their thing?
Yeah, they lived out in the desert and essentially ate wild food, really.
So they practiced poverty, like the Stoics?
Similar, yeah.
So do you think the Stoics fasted?
I'm not sure. Probably. I'm sure they didn't eat really lavish meals. Who were the the Epicureans? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were kind of the opposite.
What are you gonna do?
Which there's a place for that too. I think it's all about balance. But
yeah, so
again, we've come from a feasting and fasting.
Well, wouldn't it make sense then that we ate that way if we fasted and we feasted?
Yeah.
So if we should we try to let ourselves get to the point where we're just like absolutely hungry, cannot do anything but think about food, and then just like
gorge
destroy
yourself?
our pantries? And
well, I mean, hopefully your pantries will be filled with good, healthy things, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to body wisdom as well, because really, if you really get in touch with yourself, you'll probably want to feast a little more naturally in the fall and the early winter, when you kind of want to just hunker down and just like eat and like stay warm, and you get more tired, you sleep more, things like that. And so then in the summer, you kind of naturally want to eat more lighter things, more salads and fresh foods. So
also something that I don't think many people think about is like your body weight would vary. It fluctuates throughout the year, right? So
right.
You would be getting like more and more fat accumulation on you throughout the summer and
fall. And yeah, especially fall.
When the first cold comes and
then you'll have that store of body fat to get you through the winter,
Yeah, because didn't the colonists, when they first came to Jamestown, didn't they say that the Powhatans were fat? Didn't they actually say that?
They said they were fat and lazy or something like that.
Yeah. Makes sense, right? And Native Americans are traditional people, right?
Right.
They were not hunter-gatherers, though.
Well, I guess partially, and it kind of depended on the time period. But yeah, they obviously, planted corn and squash and beans and things like that.
Potatoes.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were, I guess you could say hunter-gatherer gardeners. Which is perfectly healthy as well,
Okay.
I mean, there's plenty of...
Were any of them hunter-gatherers, or were they all corn growers?
Sure, it depends on the time period. I'm not exactly sure when corn was introduced or started to be domesticated.
It all appeared. Didn't corn, rice, and soy all appear around the same time?
Yeah, I think so. Different parts of the world, but... Now, didn't you tell me a reason for that recently? What was the reason?
I don't know.
Something to do with climate, I guess. Was it just the end of the Ice Age?
Maybe. Because which
would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to talk about that. Let's just go ahead and talk about how, like, the history of all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So when did, agriculture and grain growing and that kind of thing start?
Yeah. So there was, all right, and a lot of this comes from Spencer Wells's book, A Pandora's Seed, which he had studied a lot, and he has another book called The Journey of Man where he talks a lot about this stuff too. But there's evidence in the Middle East, close to the Sea of Galilee, that we were collecting grains and grinding flour, and that was 23,000 years ago. That there's evidence of that. So, and that was clearly before the peak of the last ice age.
So there you go, paleo dieters.
And we had been eating that, and the explanation that he gives is that there was a peak of the ice age that, and of course we're eating, and these people came in and actually found all of this wheat growing here. And it was just a small part of their diet, but they were eating it. Apparently in their bones they had high strontium levels, which signifies that they were eating the plants instead of eating the animals nearby. Of course they were still the megafauna then. They would have had whatever woolly mammoths and I don't know,
saber-toothed tigers.
Irish
be eating
elk,
those.
all of those. I don't know. They would have had all of that as part of their diet, but
they still had grains as a kind of staple, or at least a supplemental.
That's kind of what it was saying. It was saying that it was more, I would say, a staple because the strontium levels and the strontium calcium ratio were higher. So there was, and the ice age, the peak of the ice age was called like the driest period or whatever it was called.
And when was that?
It was what?
12,000.
Yeah, it was 12,700 years ago, and it was from 12,700 years ago until 11,500 years ago, and that was the peak. That was this driest period, and it was named after this plant, and the driest name from the plant actually comes from its drying effect that it has on the soil wherever it lives. And it's a cold climate, so during the ice age, the ice would have covered a lot more of the area of Siberia in northern Europe, and it would have come down, and so this plant, it would have grown just below that, which would have been the Middle East at this time. And it would have covered vast amounts of that area because it was a cold climate plant, and there weren't tons and tons of those besides like trees and stuff. But then I guess what caused the last ice age to come out was the volcano, right? The volcano in Polynesia. And it was supposed to have buried, it was in Polynesia, and then like hundreds and hundreds of miles away in India, it was supposed to have buried India in like 15 feet of ash or something awful, and that would have caused a lot of these mass extinctions, and it's shown that the megafauna disappeared when this happened. Maybe not exactly correlated with this volcanic explosion, but the end of the ice age, they all disappeared.
So we did not necessarily overhunt them.
We did not predate woolly mammoths to their extinction, no.
Right.
And of course, we also did not completely destroy the Neanderthals.
Well, yeah, their DNA is incorporated into ours, so we interbred with them.
Yeah, we didn't overhunt their prey. We just kind of absorbed them.
Right. They live on in us.
But this ice age would have then come to an abrupt ending because it would have caused the Earth to be covered in this ash, which would have heated up the climate, and so then the driest plant would have receded when the ice melted, and of course the ice melting also caused current changes in the ocean,
right?
And it caused like today's current, where Europe is actually hot for its area,
for its latitude,
location, yeah. And so this dry ice receded, and then it left desert behind it in the lowlands where it was growing, and that was where the wheat was growing before. And these people were living here, eating this wheat, and all these other animals, and so their population grew. And when they would have actually needed animals, the animals disappeared, and they didn't have any more wheat around because it was now pretty desert around. I'm guessing there were still oases and growing areas around, but they had to go to the mountain valleys to actually collect the wheat, and it's assumed that was when someone would have actually gathered the seeds, and I don't know if they would have accidentally dropped some and it grew, and maybe they thought that they could plant them or something. But
well, I think they knew what seeds did. I'm
well,
sure they had
true.
that.
They would have been wild crafting, I suppose.
Yeah.
But they actually brought the seeds down and started planting them, and because they had such a demand with the population and they didn't have the animals anymore, they started relying on this wheat, right? That's at least one of the theories.
Of course, Göbekli Tepe might paint a different picture.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, like how that works into it. It's all right. Göbekli Tepe is an area in Turkey, and it's apparently a humongous site that was built for religious beliefs, but it was built by hunter-gatherers because
stomach contents that have been analyzed have shown wild foods.
Yeah, but there are
huge, temples and statues and things like that are probably for, religious.
Yeah, people think that there were these hunter-gatherers. It would have, didn't they say something like slaves were involved?
That's a theory.
But they would have had to have...
They built it somehow, and slaves may have been...
And so they got the grains. They got slaves to collect the grains and grind them up and make food for the other slaves, right?
That's how they would feed the slaves. Because, the oldest wheat field was discovered about 20 miles away.
Yeah, genetically, that's where they position it, about 20 miles away from Göbekli Tepe.
Right.
And that would have happened around the same time.
Yeah. 12,000 years ago or something of that nature.
I would assume that
11,000.
It wouldn't be coincidence that all this happened. Maybe there were multiple pockets that discovered they could eat wheat at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, no one really knows the whole, picture.
So you're saying that people didn't know how to write? They were illiterate? You're not telling me that hunter-gatherers were illiterate. That's why we're smarter than them.
Well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what other... Okay, well, let's just talk about what some of the diets of some of these traditional peoples would have been around the earth. Okay. And maybe how we can relate that to our diets today or where some of the food comes from.
All right, well, the thing about traditional societies is that they ate a lot of different things. If you look at the Eskimos, they would eat lots and lots of, obviously, seafood and fatty things like blubber, and not, they still ate plant foods, but, it was mainly seafood and land animals as well. And then, in the tropics, they would have eaten a lot more plants and fruits, and then, like, a smaller amount of seafood and small game and things like that.
How does this differ from the paleo diet?
Well, the paleo diet it kind of misunderstands what we used to eat, and it's based on modern foods, really. For example, they don't really, at least the popular, interpretation of it doesn't...
The Rob Wolf interpretation.
Yeah, say anything about wild foods. Obviously, our hunter-gatherer ancestors were eating completely wild foods, and domesticating, species, whether it's animals or plants, really changes the composition of it. So that's one thing. And then
some people do talk about eating organ meats, but they don't talk about it as a focus. They really only mention liver. Yeah,
the thing about hunter-gatherers and traditional societies is they really prized the organ meats and the fat. They would eat those first, and sometimes they would even discard the muscle meat if there was, plenty of it.
Didn't you say that you had read somewhere that there was some kind of record of Native Americans that had an eating contest where one would start on one end of the intestines and one would start on the other, and they would eat until they got in the middle?
Whoever got in the middle first would be the winner of the contest, right? And so this was just like raw, like fresh intestines, like
with stuff still in it.
With stuff still in it.
And there was Deep Nutrition by
there was
Catherine Shanahan?
Shanahan, I think so. But there was a quote from one of those people in those tribes, and it said, if you eat these intestines with the half fermented herbs that the deer ate, or whatever it was that they were eating, then you don't need any kind of, supplement or vitamin. Like that's what you need right there.
Yeah.
So, organs is a big part of, the universal aspects, because even though every tribe in different parts of the world were eating different things, they still had things in common. And one of the things was organ meats and fat. And then another thing is seafood. There's a lot of emphasis on seafood, especially things like shellfish and fish roe.
Shellfish.
What?
You're shellfish.
Her.
Didn't even like the people who lived high up in the mountains, didn't they trade like butter or something like that, or like stuff for seafood with the lowland people who were next to the coast?
Yeah. Yeah, they would trade like inland plants or, whatever for seafood. Or they would just travel down to the sea themselves, very far distances, in order to get the seafood. And this, these things were prized as, especially for, couples who were going to conceive in the next 6 months or year.
Yeah, they got like dibs, right?
Yeah. That and the growing children. So,
I'm guessing it was the older women that probably went down and collected this stuff, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because women didn't start collecting enough food for themselves until they were like 25 or something, right?
Yeah, the younger women did all the easy stuff like berry picking. And then the older women were stuck with the, digging out the tubers with their, digging sticks and stuff.
So, and they were 25, that's when they gathered enough food.
That's when they started doing
for them, right?
Right.
But that's not even for the kids.
That's not even for the kids. The grandmothers would basically feed the kids, which is that's kind of carried over into today, really, because the typical picture, I guess, of a grandmother is baking cookies and
having all this stuff just to spoil the kids.
Yeah, spoiling the grandkids. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess spoiling is probably an ancestral memory thing,
right? I'm sure it's because the elderly, would want to feel useful, still be of use to the tribe,
Well, when I think about a traditional family dynamic, not traditional as in this, just like what I picture, the standard, it's like the grandmother especially would spoil the granddaughter, but then if it was a son or something, he'd go in with the granddad, and the granddad would tell all the wise tales, and he would spread his knowledge to this child.
Right. Yeah.
And that's usually at least what I picture of grandparents and grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that's probably what would have happened. That's why there were elders. And
yeah, definitely passing on their traditional, wisdom.
So should we be eating these foods that our ancestors ate? Like, say, like you took your 23andMe test and you found out that you were from, England and Ireland or something like that. That was a big part. So should you be eating like oats and seafood and that kind of stuff?
I mean,
Butter?
that could be a consideration. Yeah.
Genetically, wouldn't that be the best thing for you to eat? Like, say you were 100%, I don't know, Scandinavian. Wouldn't it be best if you ate butter and
seafood and dairy? And, yeah. I mean, theoretically, yeah. Again, of course, there are going to be individual variations there. And then, of course, you have to also consider, do you want to eat completely for your genetics, or do you want to eat locally with your own local foods? I mean, there's kind of a balance there, but
that's what, like, when I first wanted to start to eat healthy, I remember trying to look up stuff because we live in Virginia. We tried to look up what the Powhatans would have eaten and what the
there's not much information on that.
Yeah.
It's because the colonists who came over here they looked down upon the Native Americans, and so they wouldn't want to record what they were eating because they thought it was disgusting. And
I've got a joke for you that I heard yesterday.
Oh God.
I meant to tell you this. Let's take a quick break and then I'll tell the joke. Hello everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for all your support, and please head over to iTunes, leave me a review, tell me what you think of the show. I appreciate it. So why was it that the Native Americans, like, why were they in America first? Why were they?
Because they came over here? I mean, what do you mean?
Because they had reservations.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't actually think like that, but
no. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably a joke that colonists would have told each other.
Yeah. Well, we are colonists, essentially.
Speak for yourself.
I mean, it's still happening, so.
Well, I suppose that's true.
Yes.
So does that mean that building schools in Africa is bad? Are we colonizing Africa?
Yes, we are. And
taming
I think
people that are
I think
wild
we've
or something?
already
Isn't that how we view it?
we essentially have already taken their lands, except for groups like the Hadza. But
The government's taken our lands. We rent land from the government.
well, yes, but I was saying that
Pay quote
these
unquote taxes or something.
these Native Africans have been driven out of the best lands by us because we've gone and taken the lands for agriculture and whatnot, and so they have this crappy land that they can't really do anything with. And so they kind of have to rely on us. We've kind of forced them into that position.
What about the Hadza and the Maasai? I remember watching that show that they documented the Hadza, and it was like, they run around shooting squirrels with bows and arrows and stuff.
Yeah,
and
well, they're one of the last.
they were wearing like Nike shirts and
Yeah, well, they're one of the last hunter-gatherer groups, but, they're kind of slowly being, I guess, incorporated as well. But
so the Maasai are farmers, right? They're traditional people.
they're shepherds.
Shephordial. They're shephordial peoples.
They're pastoralists. There we go.
Pastoralists. Yeah.
That's the word.
I like shephordial.
Yeah, they rely on their cattle for the basically milk, blood, and beef is what they rely on.
Mm-hmm. So blood, like the Mongols, right? Because the Mongols would mainline their horses and drink their blood while they were riding.
Yeah,
so
well,
they didn't have to stop and eat.
I mean, the British did it too. They used blood.
Blood sausages?
Blood sausages and puddings, and black pudding, I think, is made of blood. So yeah, that's another, feature of hunter-gatherer in traditional societies is they use the whole animal, not just organs, but the blood and the bones to make broth and things like that.
The hooves.
Yeah, and they would use the hides, obviously, for, clothes and shelters and whatnot.
The brains to tan it.
The brains to tan it, yeah, or to eat.
What about the eyeballs?
They, I'm sure, would eat the eyeballs as well.
Fish eyes are
I'm
crunchy.
sure it'd be good for your eyes.
So, it's good for your eyes. Eating eyes is good for your eyes. Eating brain is good for your brain.
Yes, it is.
So
it's one of those kind of intuitive things that, kind of makes sense when you think about it. You don't really think about it.
If you have a leaky gut, shouldn't you eat other intestines?
Probably.
Well, it probably has probiotics and it would...
Yeah.
Clever. It's almost like...
I know people who have thyroid problems sometimes takes, desiccated thyroid supplements.
But that means that fat makes you fat, right?
Well, no.
Wait a second. And what does the pancreas do?
It secretes insulin.
Yeah.
The fat storage hormone.
What... I just want to go over some examples of some of these traditional cultures and some of these wild hunter-gatherer type cultures and what they would have eaten.
Okay, so like specific...
Yeah, so like what would the Germanics, and the Swiss and stuff, I remember that the Swiss Guard, okay, let's talk about Weston A. Price first.
Okay.
So Weston A. Price was a dentist in the early 1900s, 1920s?
1930s.
30s. He realized that most of his people in modern day America, well, I guess not modern day, 1930s America, was having a lot of tooth problems, and they were having root canals and cavities and all this kind of stuff.
Crowded teeth.
And he decided to go study people and figure out where this comes from, why this is happening to these people. And so he went and he visited tons of people, I don't even know how many different tribes and villages and stuff, to try to determine where this came from. I don't even know how he thought of this. This was a great idea. They should have done this before.
Well, he wanted to seek out a population of people who did not have these problems to see what the difference was, and he couldn't find anyone who didn't have these problems in America. So
that's true. So then he just went from place to place, and he documented everything. He documented what they ate and what their teeth were like. He took pictures of them, and he, of course, made side comments about them and stuff.
Yeah, about their general health, and then he took samples of their food to analyze it for the nutrients.
Yeah, right. For the vitamin and mineral
contents.
So, yeah, the Germanics I'm guessing.
I don't think he went to Germany.
He went to, so the Swiss. I know he went to the Swiss, right?
Yes.
And he said that this village he went to, a lot of the Swiss Guard in Rome, in the Vatican City, they came from this village, right?
Right, because they were so healthy.
And they were robust.
Very robust, yes.
So what did they do? They rubbed butter on themselves. They stood in rivers,
That
right?
was Germanic.
That was
Or
Germanic.
British or something.
They all run together. That's why you know a little bit more about this than me. That's why we're
Well,
talking about it.
The Swiss people relied mainly on rye bread and dairy products like cheese and butter. So that was kind of their staples, along with, garden foods in the summer and things
They
like
were
that.
traditional people.
They were traditional people, yes.
So
They had agriculture and everything. And, he did find that they did have a slightly higher rate of, cavities and things like that than some of the other traditional people they studied, especially the ones who had more seafood and wild foods. But they were still extremely healthy compared to, 1930s America.
So the traditional people, are they less healthy than hunter-gatherers?
Slightly, yes. I know, bone analyses have shown that when we made the transition, 10,000 years ago or whatever, from, hunting and gathering to, relying on agriculture, our brains shrunk and our bones got weaker and things like that.
Because didn't they say that Otzi, the Iceman they found in, the Swiss Alps, they found grains in his stomach, but they also found he had, cavities or he had something else.
He had arthritis and
yeah.
a couple other problems.
And so it was determined that he was an agriculturalist.
Yeah.
But he would have been a traditional foods.
Yeah, and he did have wild foods in him as well. So he was,
Didn't he have a little survival
both.
kit that had herbs in it or something?
Yeah, mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Was it was it cordyceps or something?
I'm not sure exactly, but I'm sure it's some kind of medicinal mushroom, yeah.
I think cordyceps came from Asia. I think it's used in Chinese medicine, right? 5,000
Probably.
years of documented history. Shout out to Sean T.
Sean Stevenson.
Sean Stevenson.
Yeah, not Shanti.
Shout out to Sean Stevenson. So, what about the Irish then? What did they eat? Oats?
Yeah, they relied on...
Potatoes?
No, not potatoes. Potatoes were introduced from the Americas later on. But, yeah, the Irish, traditional Irish peoples relied on mainly oats and fish, like cod. And they would use, the entire fish. They would eat the whole, head and make soups out of it. And they would have, stuffed cod's head and whatever. But
Stuffed cod's head. That
yeah, they would
sounds
stuff
great.
it with oatmeal or whatever.
Oh, yeah. That sounds good.
Yeah.
It's like stuffing, right?
Yeah. So
there was what? Did he study the Maasai? Or
yeah, he studied the Maasai, who, like I said earlier,
Kang?
I'm not sure if I'll be able to remember every single tribe. So, but the Maasai,
okay.
they ate, like I said before, the milk, blood, and beef. They relied almost exclusively on those animal foods.
Aren't Maasai warriors known for their ability to run in persistent hunt and jump during their?
Yeah,
Don't
I think
they
they're most
activate
famous
their
for the
fascial or something?
the jumping, and they're very tall as well. Just very
Well, that's because they're in a hot climate, right?
I don't know.
They have more body area to.
Well, even compared to other southern people, though, they're tall. They're almost 7 feet tall or something.
Right.
So let's see. He also studied
the Colombians, right? Oh,
What?
yeah. Go ahead first.
I was going to say he also studied, Native Americans up in Canada, I believe.
So were they Inuits or something?
I think that was a separate one. I don't know. Maybe they're Inuits. They were up in Canada. That's all I know. But they ate a lot of elk, lots of organs from elk, and the wild plants and things like that. Can't think of what else they ate exactly, but
So where did the where were the Inuits? Did he study Inuits or Eskimos or anything?
Eskimos, yeah,
He studied Eskimos
up in Alaska or something.
Huh.
And so they were obviously ate a lot of seal blubber and fish,
Yeah, and
fish eggs.
They were not in ketosis because it was starchy fat, right?
Right, they were not in ketosis. Not that he studied that, but it's been studied by other people.
Yeah. But
That's a common misconception.
They still ate 50.
Yeah, they ate about 50 different plant species every year.
Yeah.
they
which
would
is still up from 30.
right, still more than Americans, even though they're in this climate that
has 2 months of sunlight.
yeah. So that says something about America.
Yeah.
Or about modern, diets, I guess.
Yeah. I remember he also studied Colombians, and I remember this because these people had saved the skulls or bones or something of their ancestors, and when he studied the thickness of the ancient Colombian skulls compared to modern Columbia skulls, it was like twice as thick or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a picture of this in the book Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price, and it's pretty striking.
So they're like I don't know, they would have like been able to fall from some ungodly distance and not hurt their heads. They probably like headbutt each other and it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, any of these cultures were much more robust than we are.
So,
we're
did he study any
fragile.
Native Americans either? Did he?
Well, the Native Americans up in Canada,
So
and then South America.
I meant like
Not
U.S.
contiguous, U.S.
Because they wouldn't have been traditional. They would have been forced on the reservations,
right.
And they wouldn't be.
Right. They weren't still living their traditional ways.
Did he study Aboriginals?
Yes, he did.
And Pacific Islanders.
Yes. So the South Americans, I remember, ate a ton of seafood. The Polynesian peoples ate, again, a lot of seafood and coconut and things like that.
They use coconut oil
as a sunblock.
As a sunblock, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably would have really exclusively been fruit and like coconut and
lots of
seafood.
Fruit and seafood, yeah. And vegetation, vegetable matter.
Vegetables, fish. Australians, I don't know.
They ate a lot of
bugs.
Game meat. Yes, all of these cultures ate insects, and that's another, problem with the paleo diet. Again, it doesn't emphasize things like the organ meats and bones, but it especially does not emphasize insects,
Yeah.
which I have a feeling that, that's one of the things that we exclude, like most of all in our modern American diet, and I'm sure that has an effect. I'm sure the insects have particular things that we're missing.
Yeah. And another good book for that was Edible by Daniela Martin.
Mm-hmm.
She was an entomologist or something? Entomophagist.
Entomophagist, I believe.
Yeah. But wasn't there also something where she talked about in the book where they tried to do this experiment where they collected crickets or something? So they dug a hole and they put a bucket in it and kind of blended it in, but then they stomped on the ground all around and they did it twice and they caught like 10,000 crickets the first time and they caught like 8,000 crickets the second time or something like that.
Yeah.
So like these 2 times for, I don't even know, half an hour of work, they caught, hundreds of pounds of crickets to eat.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, on average, hunter-gatherers work, 4 hours a day to catch all their food and whatnot. And so people think it's some like strenuous thing where you're like always searching for food, but it's really not. They have a very leisurely lifestyle compared to us.
Is that why they're fat and lazy?
Yeah, exactly. But they're happy and they're fit and they're healthy.
Yeah. I also like the picture. I think it might have been in Weston A. Price's book, but the cover of MoveNet.com,
Mm-hmm.
it's the picture of like 2, I don't know, probably 20, 30-year-old males on either side of this like 50, 60-year-old male, and they're all just like completely ripped. And
yeah.
It's just the lifestyle they had.
Well, in the book Deep Nutrition also, there's a picture of comparing 2 60-year-olds. One is Dean Ornish.
a health expert.
Yeah, a health expert. No offense to him in this, and then there's I don't remember which tribe it was. I don't know if it was the Maasai or, it was one of the African tribes, but there's a picture of a 60-year-old man from one of those tribes. And the difference is night and day. Like, this guy from the tribe, he has almost no wrinkles. He has no, flabby, sagging skin. He has, yeah. It's kind of like the, neck waddle, stuff like that. But, and you could tell he was just completely, ripped. Yeah. And, this is what those these, traditional diets will do. They will, make you age very well.
So what was the average age of hunter-gatherers? 35?
No. Well, technically, yes, but that's like saying that the average height, our current, average height is 3 feet because you're including babies.
That's true.
And so if you include infants
Babies.
and young children in the average age, then that's going to skew it down because hunter-gatherers did have a higher infant mortality, partially because of infanticide. But
why would they commit infanticide?
Population control. If the baby was weak in some way, if the mother was not ready, like the pregnancies were too closely spaced, because it's quality over quantity in these kinds of societies.
Right.
As far as children, you want to raise really strong, healthy children, as opposed to just a bunch of children whose health is going to be lower. Because then they'll all die. Realistically, in this kind of society, they would all die.
So next you're going to tell me that trees, like oak trees, are going to, I don't know,
cast off their their weak acorns.
Commit abortions to the acorns that aren't going to produce robust oak trees, right?
Exactly. Abortion and infanticide really is ubiquitous in nature. And that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
Anyway, what were we saying?
I don't know.
Differences between the 60-year-olds.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, I just wanted to point out that there's a difference in aging, and that people say that it's, I'm forgetting stuff because I'm getting older.
Yeah, that's not natural.
If that happens to you, if you get forgetful when you get older, that means...
Or anything when you get older, really.
That's true. If you have any kind of difference.
Yeah.
Balding.
Yeah, balding is a hormone imbalance,
Of course, didn't
wrinkles are from lack of
postmenopausal women, they do gain a little bit of weight, right? Isn't that normal?
Yeah, it's because of hormonal changes, but it's not going to be...
If they carried Mongongo nuts, they wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be substantial if you're, truly healthy.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
So...
And of course, women in general are, naturally higher in fat and stuff than men are. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, a healthy man's BMI is like, I don't know, 10 to 12% or something. And in a healthy woman, it's like 20 or something.
25, something 25, like that. Yeah.
It's just how it works. And you think it's because there are more nutrients stored in the fat, and so when women become pregnant, they can have a larger
those nutrients,
reserve.
Right? Because right, yeah, because pregnancy and breastfeeding draw a lot of nutrients. It requires a lot of nutrients.
Don't you burn like 10,000 calories a day when you breastfeed or something like that?
Yeah, something crazy.
Yeah, that's why
you need to eat more.
So if you are pregnant, should you eat for 2?
Well, not necessarily volume. It's not as if you're growing an adult inside you who needs 2,000 calories a day, but...
Should you drink a gallon of raw milk every day?
If that suits you. I couldn't do that. I'm lactose intolerant, but...
Yeah. Even though you're from Europe.
Even though I'm mainly
like
Northwestern European. Yeah, I'm in the 5% that is of Northwestern Europeans that are lactose intolerant, yeah.
And tell me, when was the last time you had lactose?
Today.
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, well, it's mainly actual milk that gives me obvious problems, but...
Yeah, it's probably a spectrum, too.
Yeah.
I don't really know how that works. I'm not a exercise or physiologist or anything.
I know.
Shout out to Ben Greenfield. So how can we take the stuff that these people would have done in all of these different cultures and apply it to today?
I don't think we finished the universal aspects of it.
Or were there more commonalities?
Yeah, just a few more. They all ate fermented foods.
So stuff inside intestines.
Things like sauerkraut.
Kombucha,
kimchi, kefir, yogurt, and cheese and things like that, yeah. And that, of course, helps populate your gut flora.
What about stuff like prosciutto and carpaccio.
Yeah, I mean, they would have dried and cured and smoked different kinds of meats and fish. And,
jerky. Pemmican.
yeah, jerky, pemmican. Those aren't fermented things.
They're just dried?
Yeah.
I thought it was fermented. I guess not.
No.
Pickled fish. What's the isn't there a Swiss dish? Like, it's not gefilte fish, that's Jewish. That's pickled.
I'm sure, yes.
Herring. Lutefisk.
Yeah.
It's another quote of Lutefisk for good feelings.
I'm sure it would give you good feelings. Probably increases your serotonin levels.
And smells
in the gut.
rotten.
Yeah. And then another kind of universal aspect was they prepared certain foods in certain ways. I'm specifically thinking of grains and seeds and nuts and that kind of thing. Because the thing about those foods is that they contain like enzyme inhibitors and phytates and things like that, like anti-nutrients that prohibit the seed from sprouting until it's ready to sprout, until the conditions are right. And so what that does in us when we eat it is that it'll actually bind with minerals in our intestinal tract and things like that. So we can actually become deficient in minerals. And, when it sprouts, it also unlocks a lot of the, other nutrients and whatnot in the enzymes. So
are you saying that anti-nutrients are like antimatter?
Not quite.
When it combines
I don't think
with
it'll
real
cause
nutrients,
instant death.
it releases energy.
But yeah, like a thing, so all these cultures would soak or sprout or ferment or sour leaven the grains and the seeds that they ate. So that's another thing that we can do to kind of recreate these, traditional diets in our modern diet.
So you just read about like where yogurt came from. How did it happen? Was it just like they had a bunch of milk and they left it sit and it became chunky or something? Or
I'm sure I've heard, that, of course, these are just theories of how it came about, but, I've heard that people would carry, milk in a bag or something, and, maybe someone forgot about it or went on a long trip or something, and then when they opened it up, it was like, oh, this is, sour and thick. So, yeah.
And they wouldn't let it go to waste.
Right. And they found that it was even more delicious and therefore nutritious than straight up milk.
So
of course, cultures probably would have been fermenting their milk very early on, probably right away, because, the earliest pastoralists would have been lactose intolerant.
How would you think, like, I'm going to milk this goat, but I'm not going to drink the milk that comes out, even though the baby goat drinks it?
Yeah, I don't know how it would have gone, but
maybe
they probably tried it and it gave them some digestive trouble, and so they just experimented with it. I don't know.
They didn't have Pepto-Bismol.
Yeah.
So, is that all? Are there any other commonalities?
Well, of course, we already.
Meat?
Yes,
Raw
that's
foods.
another thing. Kind of a popular thing these days is like raw foods and stuff. But there's a book by Richard Wrangham called. Is it just called Cooked?
No,
Catching Fire. It's called Catching
Cooked
Fire.
is by Michael Pollan.
Right. And
not the Hunger Games Catching Fire.
Yeah, different Catching Fire. But yeah, he was saying that was it the transition from which transition was it?
Of what?
Where we started cooking.
Oh, it
was Australopithecine to
yeah, it was like
Homo.
Australopithecus to Homo.
Yeah.
What?
So
habilis or Homo erectus or whichever one.
Yeah, it's something. But basically, he was saying that cooking could go back millions of years, before we were a species. So, yeah, cooking releases, the nutrients that we might not be able to absorb otherwise, increases calories, which would have been very important. And of course, it gets rid of toxins in a lot of foods. Some greens and like especially tubers and things like that just cannot be eaten raw. And so cooking would have made so much more, nutrition available to us.
Yeah, because
It
then
still does.
if that's true, like if it makes stuff more bioavailable and it makes things more nutrient dense, why do you still eat raw stuff?
A lot of it is the, enzymes and such. It can kind of help you digest things easier, especially when it's fermented.
So, fun fact, the difference, temperature wise, if you feel something like water, the difference between warm and hot is 118 degrees. If you feel water that's warm, it's below that. If it feels hot to you, it's above that, and that's because that's where the enzymes.
Yeah, that's where the enzymes die off. So that's a happy, quote unquote, coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't I'm trying to remember exactly. Now that I say that about cooking happening with Australopithecus, it must have been hunting or something that was the difference between, or running or something like that. That was the difference between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is that your stomach?
Yeah, just for everybody, I don't know if you can hear that on the recording or not, but my stomach growled. I've been pushing probably 16 hours for my fast right now, and I'm feeling a little hungry. So they also had a lot more variety.
Yeah.
And
we already
variety
touched
actually,
on that.
yeah, variety actually, if your diet is varied, then you will almost be guaranteeing that you're going to be getting the vitamins and minerals that you need. You're not going to be getting too much of one, becoming deficient in others. You're going to be able to have
everything in balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a problem with today's health conscious people. They're very restrictive.
Kale.
Grains might be bad for me, dairy might be bad for me, nightshades might be bad for me, so they cut it all out. And not only does that lead to binges and things later on, but you're not getting the variety that you need.
Yeah.
And that's probably why you crave other stuff too.
Yeah.
When you're too restrictive.
Well, it's difficult. I assume that, hunter-gatherers, if they would have had access to something to eat, they would have eaten it. They would have stored it.
We are, omnivores. And if a food is available and edible, or you can make it edible through things like, sprouting and cooking and things like that, then yeah, they'll eat it.
So if the Maasai would have hunted down an impala or two impalas, they would have just brought them back, eaten it all, shared it with everybody, and eaten it completely. They wouldn't have been like,
no, we need to store this for tomorrow. No, they're not going to do that. Unless, it's a culture like the Eskimos where there's just a salmon run every year that, you just have more than you literally can eat. And so, then they'll store some, they'll dry it and things like that. It's kind
of funny. I bet they had relationships with bears at that point, because the bears would not have attacked the people if they were getting all these salmon. It'd be much easier to get salmon. The bear would have just stood there and watched them probably.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure there'd be plenty of salmon for everybody, including the bears.
Yeah. But I'm guessing also with the megafauna, if you would have killed a woolly mammoth, you probably would have just picked up your whole tribe, moved it to the woolly mammoth.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Or if there was like a beached whale, you would have just moved the whole tribe to this whale and eaten.
Yeah, just camp out there. Probably. And of course, with those types of things, they would just like make a shelter out of the carcass, make like a home.
Well, yeah.
Out of the woolly mammoth carcass.
Yeah, because it's like the ribs, you can live inside the rib cage.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially whales. I mean, think of how giant that is.
Yeah.
No wonder Pinocchio could have lived inside.
Yeah, that's a true story.
So then also, I guess one more thing is the grain and seed preparations that people would have done. Like, so everybody prepared grains somehow? Right?
Yes. Nobody just plucked a grain off the grass and...
I thought we just said that people ate raw food.
Not raw grains. They ate raw animal products and raw, herbs and grasses and fruits and things like that. Not grasses, sorry.
Raw trees.
Just plants,
Yeah.
Well, they did eat trees, but not raw.
They would
inner
have
bark,
made
you know.
teas and stuff, right? They would have made teas and stuff, right?
Yeah, teas, and I know that you can cook inner bark, like boil it and stuff, or
Like willow?
fry it.
Like willow?
That'd probably be a more medicinal one, I
Willow
guess.
bark extract.
Yeah,
That's
that's like a,
aspirin.
you know, painkiller.
That's where aspirin comes from, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so did we pretty much cover everything that you wanted to talk about, or?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much to kind of recap the universal aspects where they place an emphasis on the organs, fats, and seafood. They ate the whole animal, fermented foods. You know, some raw, some cooked, including animal foods. The grain and seed preparation.
Yeah,
So.
and then having a large variety, everybody had variety.
Right.
And that would have been forced by the season. So.
Yeah. I mean, in the wild, you know, most things are available for only a few weeks of the year. So you're eating a lot of that. And then after that, something else would be in season. So you're eating a lot of that. And it just continues like that the whole year. And of course, you know, some tribes had kind of staples or whatever that they could potentially store. But
Yeah, sounds good. So I wanted to thank you again for coming on and helping me with this.
well, thank you.
You know, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about what you like to do and what you like to research and stuff?
Well, it basically started when I, you know, got pregnant. I started getting interested in health just because I wanted to have the most, you know, healthy kid that I could. And of course that has kind of taken me down a long rabbit hole. And I've had a lot of, you know, changes, but I've kind of hit upon what true health actually is, I think. You know, of course, implementing it is difficult at times just because there's so much, but that's kind of my passion, is to learn about these things and, you know, try my best to apply them.
Yeah, so we'll probably be back to talk about some more aspects of health and lifestyle in some later podcasts, but I wanted to thank you one more time, Briar, for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. This podcast is brought to you by Vitality Health Products. Behold the power of vitality. Now, this is a company that I started to provide organic whole food supplements for people who really care about the quality of their supplements. Right now, featured at vitalityhp.com is the world's first energizing mind-body supplement called Dual Energy. To find out more, go to vitalityhp.com. Dual Energy, clarity for the mind, power for the body. I also wanted to tell everyone who wanted to support this show, please head over to my website, Human Atavist, that's HUMANATAVI.st, and just donate $1. That helps keep this podcast going. Just one more thing, I wanted to remind everybody to head over to facebook.com/humanatavist to hook up over there. My Twitter handle is humanatavist, @humanatavist, and I have a YouTube channel at Human Atavist. Please go check it out. I appreciate everything, guys, and I'll see you next time.